Hello, everybody, and welcome to our Talk to Your Meeting Daughters edition in August. Good morning, Martin.
Good afternoon, Paul. How are you? It's afternoon in Ireland. So,
Yes, it's already good afternoon. My mind was fixed in the morning period that I had this day as August is coming in so slowly on all of us, right?
yeah. Well, you never know what part of the globe people are going to join us from at this stage, Paul. So, it can be morning, afternoon, evening, or middle of the night, depending on who joins us.
Absolutely. And I'm so surprised also in courses that I've been hosting on the Digital Collaboration Academy, as you know well. Some of our participants are from the Australia, and in the southern
Yes.
hemisphere, they're dressing all these clothes to protect them against the cold. And oh my God, this is becoming really like a small village.
Yeah. We are certainly having that. Yeah, absolutely. So,
Anyway,
our topic of interest today, Paul, away days.
way days, yes, and unfortunately, most of our speakers are not able to join for any particular and very personal reasons that we understand. Of course, I mean we are still in the midst of a pandemic in many countries, and not all of us are safe at home and have able to be in this podcast. Should I say the video cast?
Yeah.
Um, But anyway, it's really a pleasure to be here with our viewers in this time of the busy time of the year for some of you in the southern hemisphere, not everybody in the summer here in the northern hemisphere is a more calm period. And also some organizations take advantage of these periods to do some away days, right, Martin?
That's right. Yeah, I'm due to facilitate one myself in the very near future, Paul, actually. Yeah.
Absolutely. Is there a date fixed?
Not yet. Again, just working around people's annual leave and when people are going to get back. So we have to fix a date. It'll be probably the last week in August, first week in September.
Okay.
But it's kind of topical that this small piece of work has come up, and that we're having our discussion today about away days and how they might change, because even the logistics, just the most basic logistics of putting together an away day, the preparation work is substantially different because of COVID, countermeasures that you need to take for COVID, testing, vaccinations, consents. There's and then the possibilities of people working hybrid, so joining away days in a hybrid mode of some virtual, some joining live, and mixing both. So there's some interesting new developments that all of us have to kind of get our heads around.
Absolutely. I've seen interesting articles from McKinsey on the workforce of the future,
Yeah.
and it's incredible how the time companies schedule for remote work varies according to the state of the development of the economy of a country economy.
Mm.
Have you noticed that?
I haven't noticed that, but as I'm speaking to different people here in Ireland, I suppose one of the things that I see or seems to be most preoccupying people is the fact that people do not want to go back to the office full time. Now, there's a very mixed range of reasons that I'm hearing for that, but the single biggest one, at least in Ireland, in the Irish context, is just the time lost in commuting.
Mm-hmm.
That where people lose an hour in the morning and an hour in the evening, and because of the whole lockdowns in COVID, they've discovered the value of those 2 hours with children, with people that they're looking after or might be minding, with visiting parents and so on. So I think there's going to be a very, very significant amount of debate in the coming weeks and months as to how we get back. What's the new normal going to be? And I think that's going to have a really big impact on, so what will new normal away days look like and sound like? And I think they're going to be different, actually. I think there are going to be changes arising.
Absolutely, and I'm trying to share here these interesting infographics for our viewers. Let me see if I can find here the file that I would like to Okay, I have it here. It's are you already seeing my screen?
Yeah, perfect there.
Yes, it seems like the more advanced an economy, the greater the potential for remote work. Any possible explanation for these, Martin?
I would guess probably on the technology side, I would imagine it's just pure access to internet connectivity and to high speed broadband. Because remote work at virtually any level simply requires really good and reliable internet connectivity. And certainly, again, just in an Irish context, the west part of Ireland has been relatively poorly served by internet connectivity. We've had a major governmental contract was signed just about 18 months ago for a kind of a mass rollout of high-speed broadband across all parts of Ireland. Um, and and that's been slowed down a little bit because of COVID. But there are significant parts of the west part of Ireland that just have very slow or no access to broadband at all. And that obviously causes a major difficulty if you want to have any kind of remote working.
Mm-hmm.
So I would imagine that's perhaps the biggest one. I would also suspect there may be cultural factors in play, because certain countries, just the concept of working remotely may be countercultural. It may be too isolationist for the way that people just organically want to get together and work in a face-to-face, person-to-person type environment. So I suspect there are many variables, but I think they could be two fairly significant ones, you know.
Absolutely. And did you notice the difference between China and India in relation to the rest of the, Western or more economically advanced world?
Yeah.
Because we have also data from Japan and US, they don't differ significantly. But China and India seems to be in a separate group on their own, whereas the potential for remote work is way, way below the rest of the world. And in particular, if you notice, India is like half the potential of
Yeah.
China on my observations here. This is amazing.
Yeah.
I was never expecting India to be, like the last in the league of the digitally transformed, digitally ready societies.
Yeah. But then I suppose when you think about it, Paul, another really significant factor is just having the physical space to be able to work remotely. So in your own house or in your own home, to be able to carve out that little cubicle, even if it's just an airing closet. But a lot of people just may not have the luxury of being able to find that space. And again, countries with really high populations, with high people densities, maybe that's a factor that perhaps people just are challenged to find the physical space to be able to operate remotely, where they can concentrate and stay focused on their work.
Absolutely, you are quite rare, and the consequence here is that you are creating like a gap that I think it's even wider in countries like India and China, because in particular, due to their massive amount of population, I am sure that almost the same amount of million of internet users, are able to do remote work in India as
Yeah.
compared to other countries in Europe, for instance, in Spain or in France. But it's the gap that I'm worried about in terms of the
Yeah.
total population, right? We see fortunately in Europe, this gap is not so steep.
Yeah.
And this is something also we need to concern when we're talking about away days in companies. There are all these remote away days could not be possible in companies where the workforce is required to be in like in an industry line or in a factory shop floor.
Yeah.
And that's interesting challenge that we have to
Yeah.
assess. Anything else you'd like to comment on this diagram?
Not really, although I suppose that's a percentage of the 2018 workforce. So just that, how the workforce has changed and is changing over the last, say, 18 months as a result of COVID. And I think there's certainly another pattern that I think is likely to emerge. We're beginning to see the start of it, and that is where people in certain sectors of industry have now started to shift away from those sectors because due to COVID, either their work just stopped, they ended up on government support, and now that they've had time to figure out what they want to do into the future, they may simply not go back into that workforce. And I know aviation is an area that I pay quite a bit of attention to because that's my long-term background. That's one area where I would foretell or predict that there will be potentially significant changes in the workforce into the future. And then there are other areas where there was virtually no impact other than people had to work remotely. So people continued to work their standard hours, they maintained their standard pay, but they just ended up working physically separated from their work colleagues. Certainly work that I've done that you're familiar with, Paul, with colleagues in Australia, in Sydney, with Meeting Quality, Kelvin McGrath and his team. We developed a module for Kelvin's product that specifically looked to interrogate people who were working remotely. And we were particularly interested in 4 different aspects of that working relationships. And it's very interesting to see some of the results that we're starting to see come back from that now, where I suppose the most concerning result in general, and this is very general comment, but in general, productivity has either at a minimum stayed the same or actually increased, which might be a little counterintuitive, but actually productivity has generally increased where people have worked remotely. So that's one very interesting observation. Secondly, over the last maybe 9 months, it appears that people have found a better balance between work and life, work and home balancing. The third piece of data that has generally come back is that people are feeling more isolated from their working teams, and that's a bit logical. But here's this concerning part, where productivity has increased, broadly speaking, where the sense of isolation from team has increased, broadly speaking. The concern is that the sustainability of those arrangements are now being questioned by more and more people. So I think there's a pinch point coming. I don't think we've reached it just yet, but I think there is a pinch point coming where if the productivity continues high, if people's personal stress levels continue to slightly increase, then I think there's an increasing risk of people reaching burnout. And I don't know what the consequences of that are going to be at a mass country level, but I think there's general cause for concern. And I think that's going to be a significant factor and consideration for people coming back into face-to-face working environments. It's to balance that productivity curve with the personal stress curves and to see where is the sustainable balance to hold that into the future. So I think there's a lot of difficult questions yet to be asked arising from COVID. And the fact that we have resurgence with the Delta variant now, that we have a resurgence in many, many countries with hospitalizations, with death rates, with infection rates. I think we still have a ways to run on this one. And our remote working arrangements are still subject to quite an amount of interrogation, consideration, and resolution to bring it to a sustainable level for everybody.
Absolutely, Martin. You are so right there. Let me just share your recent article published by Elise Kidd, which is also a dear book co-author
Yeah,
with us. And Elise has just published this article. I'm not sure if you are you seeing my screen now.
seeing the fine. Yep.
Yeah, it's called "Leading Successful Ends All Ends Meetings and Avoid the Common Mistakes that you need to do in to advance our meeting." Of course, I think Elise's conception of all ends meetings could be what we also consider to be away days in
Yeah,
a
very much so.
company,
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
of course, an interesting mistake she points out: the mandatory attendance. So it's a little bit of a contradiction, because if it's a all hands meeting or away day, should everybody attend these meetings, these all hands meetings?
Yeah, really,
What
really
is
good
your
question.
opinion there? Huh?
Yeah, actually, I facilitated an away day, which was the format that we took was open space. This is going back about 18 months ago. And when I introduced the client to the concept of the open space away day, I said, look, one of the opening remarks that I normally use is I tell people at the very beginning that if they don't want to be there, they don't have to be there. And that was shock horror. And we had a discussion about it. And they didn't want me to make that announcement at the very start. And I pushed back and I said, well, look, I said, if people stay and they don't want to be there, I said, what positive contribution can they possibly make versus what negative contribution are they most likely to make? Now, we agreed that I could still make the announcement, but the client still wasn't overly happy. So when I made the announcement on the morning opening the event, 2 or 3 people immediately came to me when the session started, immediately came to me and said, do we really not have to be here? And I said, well, no, you don't. If you don't want to be here. But I said, by not being here, I said, 2 things are going to happen. One, you won't know what went on here today, but you're going to be back here tomorrow. And I said, something major might have changed and you'll have absolutely no understanding as to why or how or where it came from. I said, the second thing is the reason for you not wanting to be here might actually be good enough reason to stay, to make your contribution, and to see if you can actually bring about change in the circumstances that cause you not to want to be here in the first place. So again, people stepped away, thought about it for a while, and I did pay attention to, at 4 o'clock that evening when we were closing, I paid attention to, were the 2 people still there that had approached me at the very beginning? And both of them were still there.
It's an amazing story, and
Yeah.
another mistake that Elise points out is the fact that there's no interaction in these all hands or away day meetings. Sometimes it's just the management team that do all the talking, and
Chalk
there's
and
no
talk.
interaction about the
Yeah.
what do you think about this?
I think the format.
Manager is afraid of designing processes for that allow for interaction.
Yeah, I think that's really the critical question. And again, just over the years, Paul, as I've facilitated more and more different types of workshops, I've come to the conclusion that if you're going to run any kind of a workshop where people have to sit still at a desk for anything more than about 20 minutes, then the chance of it being a failure increases dramatically. Now, that begs the question of what constitutes success or failure if you're holding an away day. So that pushes us right back to the days and weeks before the away day. What is the outcome that somebody is looking to achieve? And that's perhaps the most important question that I push really hard with my clients when we're in the preparation stage. Because if the outcome is for people to walk away with information or for people to hear what the latest sales figures were, to hear what the next product developments are, I kind of look at it and say, but okay, is that really the best way? Is running an away day the best way to communicate that type of information? As opposed to, should you not be looking to get information from your people? And if you get over that hurdle, so if we can agree that the purpose of the event, broadly speaking, is to be interactive with the people that we bring together, that then forces us down the road of saying, okay, so what's the best process or method, as you mentioned, to engage people positively, constructively? Sometimes there's going to be a bit of negative interaction, but that's not necessarily always a bad thing either. And again, I've encountered a couple of events myself where you're wincing a little, where you see a bit of an engagement with 2 or 3 people. A little bit of gentle facilitation might be needed to calm things down a bit. But again, if the process is well structured, you can create the space for people to disagree, step away, have a think, and come back together. And I think that's another key part of the away day arrangement, so that you allow some kind of incubation space where ideas brought up, people can step away, and it might just be step away for half an hour for a cup of coffee, but that you create these breaks in the away day. And it might even be across 2 days or 3 days, but this incubation space for people to consider, reflect on, synthesize what has been happening, and then come back and progress the whole discussion to the next steps of where you're trying to get it,
Absolutely. Another interesting observation from Elise is the what she considers the mistake on the bungled Q&A. That is to say, some managers elude the answers, are not straight to the point when they are asked for critical questions on their team or their organization. And she mentions here the fact that we can also create crowdsource question in advance. So this is obviously an advantage if you create a virtual environment for your away day in order to collect the discussions before the event actually starts, right?
Yeah. And I mean, you know it better than anybody else, Paul. Packages like and products like Housebase and Group Map and so on that you profiled in the book, they offer so many possibilities for pre-workshop and pre-away day interactions in a very structured way, in a time-sensitive way that everybody doesn't have to be there together. People can interact in their own time, at their own pace, and we can still capture and record and structure people's inputs. So now people can co-create the agenda for their away day, and they can co-create the process for their away day. So that by the time you get to the away day, it's almost like people are continuing a conversation they've already started, either with themselves or with their work colleagues. I suppose the obstacle, which Elise properly alludes to, is if you have managers who are fixated on controlling the outcome before they have even had the inputs, that's when I think away days can start to seriously suffer, can become a significant waste of time, and actually can have a very negative effect on the respect that workers would have for management teams who try to predetermine the outcomes of away days that are intended to not have a predetermined outcome, if that makes sense.
Absolutely, makes total sense. And interestingly, Martin, one something that also struck me in this interesting and well-written article by Elise Keaton in Lucid Meetings, and when you mentioned about Housebase and Group Map, of course, Lucid platform, Lucid Meetings platform.
Absolutely, yeah.
A useful platform for you to create that kind of discipline on your everyday meetings, but also on your away day, and prepare better your away days. And it's particularly the following up, the follow up on these company days, where sometimes groups and teams have wonderful discussion. They come up with brilliant ideas, but then there's this lack of following through on what was agreed and what was decided. And even sometimes it's really a question of if this is a recommendation or it's really an actual decision. What is the outcome of your away day? And there's this lack of preparation there. Would you like to comment on that?
Yeah, actually, two specific points, Paul, actually come to mind as you say that. I think the very first one is making it explicit that follow-up is required. And follow-up, I suppose one of the big risks or big dangers with away days is that sometimes participants can feel that it's an opportunity to come along, have a give out, put my ideas on the table, and now it's somebody else's job to pick them up and follow them up. That's management's job. So that's a risk. So I think confronting that at the very outset, even before the away day, I think is a significant point that should be kept in mind for the planning stage. My second observation on it, and it brings me to one of my favorite formats of handling away days, and that's the open space methodology or approach, which again, Paul, you're familiar with, but absolutely explicit in that format is that the participants are required to take ownership of whatever aspects of their own agenda they want to follow up and they want to pursue beyond the actual time limits of the day itself. So again, I think pre-announcing what follow-up is expected or anticipated and how it should be handled. And I think the format of the event itself, and my personal preference for having a very positive follow-up, is to use an open space type approach, because that both of those together now give a sense of empowering the participants to take ownership. The risk of that, and again, I always discuss this with clients, the management teams, I said the risk for the management team is sometimes you have to be willing, one, to let go a little bit. In other words, give people the opportunity to follow up. Not that you have to interfere with the follow-up, but let people take responsibility for following up initiatives that they were party to developing. And I think the second concern or consideration from a management team point of view is you may not always agree with where people are going to try to take something. And sometimes it can actually be very productive to go along with it for at least for a while to see where it might go. Because if that's an approach that companies or organizations haven't used previously, by empowering participants, by showing confidence in and trust in the participants, you can find that 2 or 3 or 4 people that might never have shown leadership actually do take on responsibilities because they become passionate about the subject matters that they dealt with during the away day. Now, that's a dynamic process. It's developed through the preparation for the away day. It's supported by the way in which you interact during the away day. But the follow-up to the away day may need slightly different ways of doing business to what happened before the away day. So like all of the way that I would normally talk about meetings, Paul, which you're familiar with, that I don't see a meeting or an away day as just one event. They have to be considered as a series of events, and how one is handled dictates how the next will be handled. And now the collective dictates what's the benefit that we are all going to get from the time that we've invested in this overall meeting process? And away days for me are a critically important point where you can bring about really important changes and shifts in the modus operandi of the organization, but even in the thinking of the managers, the thinking of the participants. So they are really potent opportunities for change if organizations choose to pursue them.
Well, absolutely, and that's probably what Elise terms by the all hands cadence meeting, so that it will be an all hands that was scheduled regularly.
Yeah.
And then obviously there's also the option for the broadcast, especially for a larger organization, and this is making incredible sense now in these days of pandemic, that a large organization can rapidly broadcast the message from the CEO, and these virtual platforms, collaborative platforms, allow for the interaction to happen, right? So
yes,
it's no
absolutely.
longer one-way communication when you do the broadcast, because you can have instant feedback from your workforce on the issues you are addressing, and especially if you carefully design the agenda. This is also valid, by the way, for a way to engage your customers, your customer base.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
You can design a meeting to get to engage all your channel partners with a vision from the CEO, and then some addresses by marketing people and how the company is going to position in the future, and then rapidly get feedback from the audience via these methods. Of course, that if the design of the meeting is not well made, you can have nasty surprises, and that's why people normally avoid these participatory processes.
Right? Absolutely, yeah. I think there's an interesting point about Lucid when you look at option one that you showed there, Paul, with the cadence, the all members cadence meetings. I think a really important point about Lucid Meetings overall methodology, if you like, is that they place great emphasis on two things. One is the different types of meetings, and the idea that you don't just hold a meeting, that you become very focused on what type of meeting are we actually going to hold, what types of inputs, what type of process during the meeting, and what type of outputs are we looking for. So that's a really key part of the Lucid brand and the Lucid way of thinking. I think the second really important part, which I'm particularly passionate about, is this concept of having meetings in a sequence or in a series, so that you can have different types of meetings in the same series of meetings, and that it's almost like carrying on the conversation. So if you start the conversation and it reaches a natural conclusion in one meeting, it may need a different type of meeting to bring that conversation to its next stage of evolution. And again, how that feeds back into the away day planning for me is that what you're doing leading up to the away day is every bit as important as what you do on the away day, which is now every bit as important to inform what you are going to do when the away day is finished. So that the away day isn't just seen as, oh, we're all taking a break. We're getting away to the beach. So I think, again, by integrating your meetings into a flow of meetings of different types to achieve different parts of the overall process of developing. So now, whether it's sales development, product development, customer service development, it really doesn't matter. It's about making best use of your meetings in order to maximize the output, minimize the time required, and keep everybody on board with the whole package of work that you're actually achieving through this flow of meetings.
Absolutely. Yes, and time goes by, flies as we are approaching the end of our broadcast, but still there's interesting observations in this article that we are using as a source of inspiration for our conversation here. And the community of practice is also an interesting example of a way to do to engage your not just your workforce but also your customer base, right? By creating a community of practice of the owners of your products, the users of your products, you can
Yeah,
definitely create a virtuous feedback loop toward your own organization in order to better serve your customers. And also, and that's probably why I think here Elise uses the terms all hands meeting, not away days, because
yeah,
this kind of problem solving meetings are normally happen in case of urgent matters where a
yeah,
company needs to call, especially small companies, since all hands meeting in order. That's not particularly the kind of team that we would like to address in an away day in a
yeah,
company where the mood environment should be constructive and not stressful, right?
absolutely.
Uh,
Yeah,
but definitely, this is also an interesting approach to engage your customers and try to find their pain points and definitely design better solutions if you are a consultancy company or
yeah,
a technology provider, finding where are the real issues that will demand your product team attention, right?
absolutely.
It's an
Yeah.
interesting
I
conversation.
think a key part of that as well, Paul, if you're going in that sort of direction, for me, is that you make the grouping as diverse as possible. So that if you're looking to a community of practice, that I always find huge inspiration when I find difference. So if too many people in the same room are agreeing with each other, it always feels like you're narrowing down your options instead of widening your options. Now it's kind of comfortable in the short term because if everybody is agreeing, we can all happily get on. And but the big risk is that we'll all happily miss some really important other issues that we should be taking into account. So I think having a diverse participant base with very different perspectives, it's more difficult, it's more challenging, it's harder to facilitate, it's more demanding of time. Sometimes it demands a lot of patience, but in general, I think the synthesis that you get at the other end of that process can be much richer, much more engaged, and probably more significantly, can get the maximum level of buy-in and commitment from that community to actually carry the ideas forward to the next stages of development, which is always a tricky part coming away from an away day, because it's the buy-in afterwards is what will make things happen or not and make it sustainable or not.
Absolutely, and that's all for the day. I think, Martin, we have pretty much covered all of Elise's material in terms of useful advice that is given in this article and
Yeah,
interesting observations that were raised in this conversation with you, Martin. Thank you so much.
pleasure.
I would like to point out to our viewers that we are here to assist you. So, in case you have any challenges concerning your next event, regardless of that being a customer event or internal company event, whatever kind of event you're organizing or hosting, please reach out to us. We'll be very pleased to assist you in any way we can.
Absolutely. Yeah,
And also to point out that we run these video casts as a series. This is our healthy virtual based website where we have this vision of how remote work can be a powerful way to transform your business and your organization by working virtually. We have here our offer for free use of our remote tool on meeting quality. You
yeah,
can also reach to this here. And there's a wealth of resources you can find in these web pages. I will put that the URL momentarily. And this is also a page where we can find also something more about us, about me, And Martin, we are here to help you in any way we can with your meeting events. And next event is going to be hosted in September already. Can you talk a little bit more about this?
The September event, in actual fact, Paul, when we started this series, which I think is about 8 months ago, and I think we've about 6, if not 7, topics that we've worked our way through. I think we're at a kind of an inflection point or a reflection point to have a look at our previous topics, have a look at some of the commentary and feedback that we've gotten from people. Certainly from our last discussion where we were talking about coaching, we had a really interesting conversation about coaching. And then we had some very interesting feedback and comments from our experts immediately after that. So I suspect, Paul, that our next one, or maybe our next couple of interactions, we might just have a look at the coaching thing again from a couple of different perspectives, because we did have some interesting reactions, some interesting comments and feedback. And we might take that opportunity then to map out the next 5 or 6 events that we would hope to run over the next 4 to 5 months.
Absolutely. And if you, dear viewers who are watching us, have suggestions for these conversations, and you yourself would like to step in the studio with us to discuss any particular issue, please reach out to us. And also the theme of the next, and it will be the end of a cycle, as you just mentioned, Martin.
Mm-hmm.
How do we blend our virtual and physical work practices? We're still obsessed with this transformation potential of the virtual over the physical. And we have here invited and confirmed some guest speakers that will be able to discuss on this subject. And by the way, just in a sense of an advanced preview of how do you think the blending of virtual and physical work practices is going to succeed, Martin? What will be the critical element on this blending of virtual and physical?
I think there's a couple of interesting possibilities. I think key issue number one is the technology. So the technology that companies have available or make available to themselves will become a significant determinant of the nature of those hybrid interactions and the potential success of those interactions. So that for me will be the first question. What technology options are there and are emerging for mass use, if you like? I think the second question that is still out there, and that is when our offices, if offices are going to get back to full strength, full time. I think that's a key question. If offices don't go back to full strength, so the pattern that I'm hearing at the moment is 3 and 2. So either 3 days in the office, 2 days work at home, or reverse that. Or maybe that becomes an alternating pattern. So this week I do 3 days in the office. Next week I do 2 days in the office. Of necessity, if that becomes a general standard pattern, I think we're going to see a lot more of hybrid working, hybrid meeting type arrangements, where we'll have some people physically around a table, and we'll have to figure out better and best ways to bring remote people meaningfully into that conversation. So there are 2 very significant factors that I think are going to be important. I think the third element that we may have to wrestle with a little bit is the types of meetings. Some of them just may not be conducive to having a hybrid type of interaction. And I think figuring out which ones are best suited to the hybrid version and which are less suited, I think that's going to be a work in progress for a while we experiment a little bit with it. And that may differ from organization to organization. The nature of the work that organizations do will have a really big bearing on on that question as well. So I think there's many variables, and I don't think there's going to be one answer that's going to fit everybody at all. I think we'll end up with many shades. So I really look forward to that conversation in September to see what the different perspectives on that be and what the different options might be.
Fantastic. And for our viewers, if you are still interested in learning more about the digital platforms we're talking about here, you have the option to buy our book, which is Beyond Virtual Meetings, Digital Tools for Higher Performing Teams and Organizations. It's available in Amazon. Please read it, give us your comments, give it your reviews. We probably need to do a second edition about this, right, Martin? Because it's been almost a year since the book was published, and so many things changes in this.
So many things have changed dramatically, Paul, I think is a fair way to put it. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
But anyway, folks, it was really a pleasure to be with you here today. Thank you for taking some time to watch us in LinkedIn in these lazy summer days. And Martin, a pleasure.
Pleasure as always, Paul. Lovely to meet you again.
Bye, everyone. Bye.
Ciao. See you soon.
Bye.